Hey, hey, Wolfpack, we're back, and today we're going to be doing something new this week. As you can tell, this scene change didn't give anything away at all. Today, we begin our very first look at a nostalgic horror anthology series that destroyed many innocent childhoods with its mastery of nightmare fuel. This show was known as Are You Afraid of the Dark, an underrated Nickelodeon series filled with many tales of supernatural adventures, much like Goosebumps, The Haunting Hour, and The Nightmare Room. The show followed a young gang of ambiguous stoners dubbed the Midnight Society, who would gather around the campfire in a dark forest, where one of them would sit in the special satanic chair to gain everyone's attention and tell a scary tale of suspense to entertain the others, while they sniffed the magic fumes from their fire to envision the episode that only the audience could see. The Midnight Society were mostly a framing device used to set up the horror stories, but sometimes they did get their own limelight days. Many of our channel's followers have been asking me to take a look at this show's episodes since I love The Haunting Hour, and they would love to see me analyze older stories from other fantastic horror shows as well, which I don't mind doing at all because horror anthology shows are amazing. Out of all the 100 Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes I had to choose from, I chose this one. Why? Because it's a horror story that features the classic horror icon Count Orlok from Nosferatu. Yeah, in this story, they refer to him as Nosferatu, but his name is actually Count Orlok in the movie. This is a common mistake because Nosferatu is an archaic term used to classify the vampire species, and Orlok is a vampire who is based off of Count Dracula. But since the old movie didn't have the rights to the Dracula franchise, they were forced to just call their movie Nosferatu, aka Vampire. Clever use of a loophole, right? Though, for the sake of plot convenience, I'll just call him Nosferatu. Most kids probably don't know much about this silent movie monster outside of a wacky cameo on SpongeBob, but this vampire is the real deal. And we are going to see how well Are You Afraid of the Dark portrays him on the small screen. Was this tale of suspense a truly gripping story full of nightmarish horror? Or does it fail to hold up by today's standards? Let's find out. This is my review on Frank the Punk's story.
The Tale of the Midnight Madness.
So our episode opens up at an old movie theater that shows classic silent movies, where we see that business really sucks.
I missed the new Star Wars for this?
We then meet our main characters. Our male lead is a nerdy optimist named Pete, and our female lead is his snarky love interest Katie. They work at the movie theater, but considering the status of their audience, that might not last very long. We also see that their jerk crabby boss, whose name I can't even remember, complains how much business sucks. Yeah, this guy's name is said so little that I'll just call him Mr. Krabs, because that's pretty much who this guy is. He's a greedy, stuck-up jerk boss who cares more about money than what his business is about. It's prototype Mr. Krabs. And something tells me that we'll be seeing a lot of Mr. Krabs archetypes on this show. So Mr. Krabs warns the kids that their place is endangered of getting shut down because business is so bad. But of course, he won't do anything about it, so naturally our protagonists do everything. Katie reveals that she's thinking about quitting to get a new movie job, which worries Pete because, of course, he's in love with her and wants to continue being with her at his favorite theater. Yeah, there's a romance subplot between our main characters in this, and while it's not awful, it is, in the grand scheme of things, completely useless. You can honestly remove their whole romance arc from the story entirely, and it would not change a single thing in the plot. Not bad, but just ultimately meaningless, especially when the scares happen. Though give Are You Afraid of the Dark some credit, they were promoting interracial couples long before it became painfully forced in the movies of today. That is amazing. Pete and Katie have an actual romance while Finn and Ray can't even get a confirmed love for each other. I hate you, Ray. Screw Kylo Ren. Finn is better. But I'm not here to complain about fantasy sci-fi stories aimed at families. I'm here to complain about fantasy horror stories aimed at families. In short, Pete's love for Katie is touching, but not very important, and totally forgettable. But nice progressive thinking there. So Pete takes initiative by trying to increase business with publicity flyers, but to no avail. Pfft, a teenager actually caring about their job? Now I know this is a fantasy. Sadly, Pete's efforts are still for nothing. Don't worry though, because a creepy stranger arrives to provide the solution to all their problems.
Who are you?
Vink's the name. Dr. Vink.
Oh my gosh, it's Dr. Vink! Who the hell's Dr. Vink, and why should I care? I'm glad you asked, House. Well, everyone, Dr. Vink is one of the very few recurring antagonists featured on the show, appearing like once every season. This was the guy who had the in a jar back on the pilot episode, but I must admit that this is a rather strange role he has on this particular episode. I'll elaborate further on this later, but let's discuss his part at the moment. Hey House, how did you even find me when I'm traveling in the great unknown where you can't even see me? Oh, Cat, I'm always watching you. Always. Ordinarily I'd question this unnatural creepy concept, but just like all Are You Afraid of the Dark characters, I'll just ignore it until it's too late. Speaking of which, that's exactly how Dr. Vink's character introduction plays out in this story. Dr. Vink is an eccentric, creepy stranger who tells them that he can save their theater from bankruptcy with a special project of his. By the way, you are not going to believe who plays this guy.
Perfect! Absolutely perfect! Think about these hands. Perfect. Perfect. Oh, yes, Julie. I must have your beautiful hands.
That's right. Dr. Shriek, the pedophile pianist from the Goosebumps episode, Piano Lessons Can Be Murder, is playing our mysterious stranger. A good villain, but he's not as big a child molester here. This guy is pretty scary, since he's the villain who scarred my brother Wolf for life. Good times. Everyone questions this guy at first, but Dr. Vink assures them that he's totally trustworthy because he loves the theater, while he soon begins reliving his childhood nostalgia. Yes, seriously, he's reliving his childhood. What a loser. He's not normal like us, right, Optimus? Don't worry, bro. After this, we'll soon go vacation in Lyoko with Ahsoka. Oh, she's so hot. But back in the plot, Mr. Krabs questions the doctor, but Vink explains that he created a special movie that will really reel in the crowd, which involves a vampire.
Film I made many years ago. A horror film. Really? A vampire film, to be precise. It's quite unique. For in my story, the vampire wins.
So, Dr. Vink created Twilight. That is evil. Dr. Vink offers them a deal. If his feature film saves their theater, then he wants them to show all of his amateur student films one night every week. But if it fails, then he'll just leave and go back to bumming around in the woods or something. Remember this agreement, everyone, because it will be important later. Mr. Krabs agrees to the deal while Vink pulls a Batman and disappears. So what does the boss do? He immediately goes back on his promise and breaks the deal to show the movie. The next day, Pete continues begging people to come to the theater, but it's too late because the boss reveals that their business is getting shut down in 2 weeks, as he tells them that they're all screwed. Why, he even gets drunk to drown his woes on this family show. He learned from the best. Well, gee, it's as if rejecting a big deal to save their theater with an epic vampire movie was a dumb idea. So as everyone angsts for a while, Dr. Vink's film reel sabotages the film projector with its magic powers. Let me repeat that. The film reel actually grew a mind of its own and destroyed another movie in the projector with magic so it could force the main characters to play it for the audience. This was meant to be scary, folks. And of course, it works flawlessly, because the heroes manage to convince the audience to stay and watch a free screening of Dr. Vink's film, so they won't demand a refund. So the crowd reluctantly stays, while Pete loads the magic film reel, revealing that the movie is Nosferatu. Oh, but get this, everyone loves it. The whole audience is scared of this black and white movie. It's a great thing that nobody in the audience has ever seen a modern horror movie in their life, because this saves the movie theater. Seriously, this cheesy black and white vampire movie is their first major hit. And we get a celebration, as the main characters get more shipping moments, but then the film glows evilly. How petrifying. The kids are surprised by their sudden success, acknowledging that Dr. Vink was right about his project saving their theater. We even cut back to the Midnight Society, so they can unnecessarily tell us what we already know, that Dr. Vink was right. Thanks for padding things out, kids. We see that Nosferatu was such a huge hit that the theater is replaying it again and again for more and more people. They even show us some clips of the vampire killing Harker. Wait a minute, this isn't Nosferatu. Sorry about stopping the review to rant some more, but you're used to this at this point. But this is not the actual movie Nosferatu. None of the stuff you see in the film occurred in the original silent movie. This is not really an accurate depiction of the true film at all, but rather, it's a slightly altered edition for modern audiences. Though Dr. Vink did say that this was his amateur film, so now I'm convinced that this stranger made bootleg copies of other famous horror movies, and he'll soon be sued for billions of dollars for copyright infringement. In short, this is not the real film, but everyone in the audience is stupid and thinks that it's great anyways, meaning that business is saved. Pete tries hitting on Katie again, but he's cock-blocked by Dr. Vink, who asks him how his film's doing. Everyone praises Vink for saving the day, like the true hero he is, but the jerk boss alters their deal, pissing off Vink.
It's time we made a deal for that masterpiece of yours. I believe we already have the deal. You promised me one night a week to show my other films, did you not? You were serious about that?
I have altered the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
This deal's getting worse all the time.
Furthermore, I wish you to wear this dress and bonnet.
This was never a condition of our
I have altered the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
This deal's getting worse all the time.
Here is a unicycle. You will ride it wherever you go.
What? I'm not riding no
Yes, really. Dr. Vink, who is supposed to be our main villain, is the one getting betrayed by this deal. The jerk boss Mr. Krabs breaks his promise to show off Vink's other student films and attempts to bribe him, stating how he intends to show only the big commercial A-list flicks in his theater. Yes, A-list pictures, like horrible reboots, terrible sequels, and lousy adaptations. Only the best, right? Outraged by this alteration, Dr. Vink refuses their money and declares that he'll have his revenge. Dude, if you want to show off your own films, then just get a YouTube channel. It's not that hard.
That's my call, my friend. This story is far from over. In fact, it's only just... Hey, he doesn't want to get paid for his film. That's his problem.
Well, I sure hope that this won't lead into anything horrifying for later. The next night, Pete checks out Nosferatu to see how cool it is, but he falls asleep. Right at the part where the vampire enters the real world. We then see Vampire Vision as the monster wanders the closed theater before he murders Mr. Krabs. But you don't want to see any of that, because we cut back to Pete awkwardly hitting on Katie again, where they finally become an official couple.
Well, I guess, that kind of like stuff.
It's okay, Pete. I kind of like you too.
But the moment is killed, along with their boss, when the kids discover that Mr. Krabs was murdered. Yep, this family show had Nosferatu violently murder Mr. Krabs by biting open his throat. Mr. Krabs doesn't transform into a vampire either. He really is dead, boys and girls. Nosferatu did just kill him. They try calling for help, but the phones are dead, the doors are locked, and the vampire's on the loose. The kids soon encounter Nosferatu himself, and a Scooby-Doo chase ensues. While this chase sequence goes on, I think now is a good time to talk about Nosferatu, the character. I really love this monster. He is very scary and entertaining. The show attempts to recreate his look from the original movie, and it does look glorious. I'm sure some people might point out how cheesy the vampire looks, but to be fair, Count Orlok did look just as ridiculous in the silent flick as well. The point of the monster's makeup is to make the vampire look supernatural and barely humanoid at all, which both the movie and the show succeed at. His presence is over the top, but he's also based on Count Dracula, so the hamminess is to be expected. I think what really sells it is the actor's performance. The guy underneath all that makeup does a phenomenal job reflecting the vampire's feral bloodlust. He lives up to the morbid role, and you are all not going to believe who plays our fantastic villain. Oh my gosh, you mean Nosferatu is really Ariel Winter? That is so awesome. I had no idea she was even on this show. No, it's Fear. Nosferatu is Fear. No joke, the actor playing our creepy vampire is Christopher Heyerdahl, the same guy who played Fear on the Haunting Hour episode Fear Never Knocks. He's back, and he's playing another epic horror series villain on a critically acclaimed episode again. This guy was amazing as Fear, and he's just as amazing as Nosferatu. The only bad part I have is that he never speaks. The show keeps our vampire antagonist as a mute villain, since Are You Afraid of the Dark didn't want to tarnish the monster's reputation as an iconic silent movie villain, which is great, since he is much more horrifying when we have no idea what he's thinking. Plus, it proves me right on one of my stupid jokes. You all thought that I was kidding when I said that this guy would be on a story where Fear never talks, but I sure showed you all with my random stupidity. To wrap up, Nosferatu doesn't talk at all, but it does nothing to diminish his status as a great horror monster. He was a cool monster in the old movie, and the show kept that coolness intact. After running around for hours, the kids have a plan how to kill the vampire. They're going to use the creature feature strategy of luring Nosferatu back into the movie, where they can kill him in that world. Pete tries tricking Nosferatu, but vampire Fear catches on to them, and he goes to kill Katie. Only to completely stop for no reason at all when he sees that his own movie is on. Though we do get a pretty cool scene where Pete enters the movie world, where he attempts to destroy the vampire's coffin, but Fear comes to confront our hero in an epic final showdown. Wow, that was kind of anticlimactic. I dare say a complete letdown. So yeah, the vampire is killed by sunlight, just like in the real movie. But it's a tad underwhelming when you consider that the feral vampire could have accidentally killed himself the second he stepped outside in broad daylight. But who cares? Vampire Fear is dead, Pete breaks the fourth wall to return, he wins Katie's heart in the end, and everything is back to normal. Why, even the boss is alive again, thinking that his brutal death was all just a dream. Yeah, no explanation, it's just all good again. But we then get to our twist ending. It turns out that Dr. Vink saw the whole thing and congratulates them all for surviving. Mr. Krabs attempts to open up a new deal with Dr. Vink, only for the doc to reveal that he bought the movie theater. Yep, Dr. Vink legally purchased their movie theater from the city council, and he plans to show all his bootleg films every night. How monstrous?
Oh, yes. Now I can show my films every night. And believe me, I've got many, many more that are far better than this one.
Yeah, that's really our twist ending. I wouldn't exactly call it scary, since the villain bought out the movie theater legally, and all he wants to do is show his amateur movies, with no hints at any villainy whatsoever. But I guess nothing scares the younglings more like big business buyouts. So the episode ends, and we cut back to the Midnight Society, where the kids vow to never see movies in theaters ever again. Too bad, they'll miss out on such big hits like The Last Jedi and The Dark Tower, but who cares, their loss. The end. And that was the conclusion to the Are You Afraid of the Dark classic, The Tale of the Midnight Madness. How does it hold up? Well, it was pretty good, with only a few minor nitpicks I have. The biggest problem I had with this was the painfully slow pacing. This episode takes forever to get going. The episode has a lot of dull parts in the beginning, and unless you are into the romance arc, nothing interesting happens until the villains show up. I'm sorry, but as sweet as the romance is, it just doesn't hold a candle next to the intriguing villains. It's still a small arc in a much bigger one. Dr. Vink is surprisingly enjoyable to watch, but he isn't in the show until the halfway point. Even worse, Nosferatu, the villain that is epic, isn't introduced until the last 8 minutes. Yeah, 8 minutes until Fear comes back, compared to his larger role on The Haunting Hour. That's a really long time to wait for the story to get exciting. Nosferatu is great, but I really wished he was in the story for much longer, and he deserved to share a more badass final fight with our hero Pete. Dr. Vink was good, but I have to say that this was one of the good Doctor's least evil appearances. Seriously, there are so many points where it feels like Vink was meant to be a designated villain in this story, when he's kind of justified for being so pissed off because Mr. Krabs screwed him over. All this guy wanted to do was show his movies in theaters, with 0 strings attached, but this idiot alters their deal and rejects his proposition, making Vink kind of sympathetic, despite the fact that he's supposed to be seen as the real antagonist. Technically, he is the main villain, but Nosferatu isn't summoned out of the movie until Mr. Krabs backstabs him. And all the villain is going to do now, with his power, is use the theater to show off his bootleg flicks. Not really that scary. Another mistake is that this episode is relying on us seeing Dr. Vink's debut episode, which he was actually sinister in. But in the end, the audience might have some trouble buying his monstrous nature here if you saw this episode without knowing that backstory. He's more questionable than evil in this episode. Nothing against Dr. Vink, but he doesn't really cross any truly evil lines until he allows the monster to kill the innocent kids too. But even then, he praises them for surviving Nosferatu, showing that he held no ill will towards them, just Mr. Krabs. I must admit that I found it hard seeing him as the true villain without knowing his identity. Thankfully, his actor does give a great performance too, and Nosferatu makes up for a lot of the darker storytelling. Nosferatu is considered the true villain of this episode. The kids are okay, minus a few of Katie's weak reactions. The boss sucks, and I was glad Vink fired him. Other than my minimal nitpicks, this was alright for the most part. A bit too slow at times, and relying way too much on backstory, but perfectly serviceable on its own. So I give my first Are You Afraid of the Dark story a gold skull. Despite the few drawbacks I had, it does have a lot of good ideas in it. Some super fun scenarios, really entertaining villains, heroes that you can root for, decent visuals, and pays a nice homage to a classic horror movie icon without screwing up his coolness. This Are You Afraid of the Dark episode represents what makes this show so good as a whole. It's fun. It's slightly scary with some weak moments in it, but it's over-the-top, nightmarish fun. I do recommend this episode, but only if you care to see Nosferatu. That is the prime selling point that makes this episode so much fun to watch. The story is fairly entertaining, so it is watchable too. But overall, The Tale of the Midnight Madness is an enjoyable experience that positively shows why some old horror stories are still great, even to this day. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, or just tune in for more videos posted here on Wolf Entertainment. I'm your host, Catastrophe, and if you want to see us take on more Are You Afraid of the Dark tales, then please let us know in the comments section below. To know more about what we do, you can also check out our Twitter page or our Patreon link in the description below. I hope you check out this show, because it really is a sight to behold. Anyways, I'll see you all later.